Baluchistan has become a cesspool of, so to say, separatist movement or mutiny or rebellious, and we know that there are a lot of foreign powers who would like to continue, whereas the Pakistani army is giving a huge sacrifice with their martyrs, with their jawans, with their officers and with the generals.
People die, military dies because of the kind of policies that generals make.
What is stopping the intelligentsia within the law enforcement authority, if there is one, to accept these voices which are becoming a chorus now?
Pakistan's intelligentsia over time has withered.
State itself is not serious.
Missing persons phenomenon is plaguing Pakistani nation, society and country, and despite efforts by the Pakistani government, unfortunately there is no abatement to this phenomenon. The Balochi women who have been protesting in Pakistan for the last few weeks are still in front of the parliament protesting for their rights with the placards of their loved ones who have been missing for years, some decades. We have started this program on missing persons to very critically analyze and discuss this issue so that the justice is served on these aggrieved families and recovery of the missing persons. Pakistani army has given a huge sacrifice in the safeguarding of the integrity of Pakistani nationalities and especially Pakistan's ideological and geographical boundaries. However, there has been so many allegations on the law enforcement agencies and on the institutions that they are not doing enough to safeguard the human rights of Pakistani people, especially Balochi people, although there are spectrum of people who were missing for years. Today we have some of the brightest intellectual minds in journalism with us, and we are very privileged to have Raza Rumi, a very famous journalist and analyst from New York, visiting our London studios, and also Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, who is a very well-known political scientist and analyst from London, who have kindly come here, and you will be hearing from them right away. Also from Islamabad, we have another famous journalist and human rights activist, Mathiullah Jan, who has been focusing on this particular phenomenon for quite some time and has had a difficult time, according to him and many by the law enforcement agencies who he felt mistreated him in the past. So in order to bring the freedom of opinion and expression and analytically discuss and debate the vital issues that is plaguing Pakistan in the country and overseas, today we bring missing persons. So we start with our first guest, Dr. Aisha Siddiqa. So let us ask Aisha, who has kindly joined us in our studio, and ask her how she takes this statement.
It's a bit of a joke, I would say. The caretaker Prime Minister, Anwarul Haq Kakar, is a Pashtun from Baluchistan. He's not a Baloch from Baluchistan, and most of the missing persons case pertains to the Baloch. The other thing is that his position has been, what he's said as a caretaker Prime Minister is simply repeating what he's always believed, which is the military's position on that issue, which is that these people don't have a case, that these people are actually terrorists, or that the state denying entirely that there is something like a missing person issue in Pakistan. So he is either joking or in a state of complete denial I don't think there is anything more.
Taking the
to
establishment basically tail, so to say.
Well, I mean, nobody thought. I mean, he's a gentleman who can't even, win union council elections, and he's been appointed there in the Senate, and it's not direct election through which you get selected or elected to the Senate. So he's been there, and he represents a certain point of view. There's nothing more to it.
There has been quite a bit of pandemonium about this issue. We have Raza Rumi, who joined us from New York in our studios in London. Raza, we had a program on this topic before, and you very kindly enlightened us. There were news and actually rumor that there are about more than 10,000 people who are missing, and then there was a commission by the Pakistani government who said 75% of the cases have been resolved, and there's only about 2,000. How do you see these two statements by the commission by Pakistan and the caretaker Prime Minister?
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. I think obviously, as Aisha mentioned, there's a culture of hiding facts and brazen lying. The missing persons issue has become really, really serious. And one of the problems is that we don't have access to exact data. The Baloch separatist groups claim that there are thousands of missing persons. You mentioned 10,000. They claim it's even higher. Independent analysts and human rights groups have also mentioned thousands. They have varied between 4 to 8,000 people. And the commission and the inquiry commission on the enforced disappearances, they say that they have almost 2,000 unsolved cases. So the data is a problem here. But as I mentioned earlier, if you remember, that whether it's one person or 10 or 100, even one person who goes missing is unacceptable. When you have a constitution in Pakistan, when you have courts, when you have a civil society, it cannot happen. It cannot be allowed. So I think numbers issue is a secondary issue. I mean, yes, we can hold the government to account, but the fact that the state picks up young people, takes them somewhere, kills them or locks them up, and then their families don't know, it's absolutely unacceptable.
The missing person phenomenon is all over the world. As you live in America, there are about 600,000 people go missing, according to NAMERS, which is the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. So now, considering that, if there are only, let's assume, few thousand people are missing, don't you think that there's a lot of fog, a lot of dilettante kind of opinions going on here?
No, I think once again, I think the issue really is the role of state. The Constitution of Pakistan, which is a consensus document, gives citizens certain rights, okay? And the foremost right is their liberty, number one, and number two, if they have been charged with something, they have to be brought before a magistrate. That's what the Constitution says. It makes it mandatory, and of course due process, right? So the issue is that if the state starts violating those rights, then there's no end to it. And that's why today, Aisha Sadiqa just mentioned Baloch people, but there are people from Sindh, rural Sindh, who are missing. There are Mahajirs who are missing. There are people even from Punjab. There are handful of cases, much smaller, and some Pashtuns also. So and from Gilgit Baltistan, and even Azad Jammu and Kashmir, what we call, there have been a few cases reported. The thing is that it's countrywide. It's an epidemic, and which basically means that the rule of law has broken down. And if the rule of law is broken down, then it's a free-for-all.
I think there is another angle to it, which is that there is a serious political issue. Missing persons in America would have its own issue. I don't think that there is, it is right to even start comparing numbers, that there is 600,000 there, so there are lesser numbers here. It doesn't make one case less serious than the other. And in Pakistan's case, this is definitely far more serious because here is a political issue. Here are people, here is a province, one of the major federating units of what makes Pakistan, asking for their rights, which they are denied, and when they protest, they get picked up, they disappear. So it's a very serious political issue. I mean, I wouldn't brush it under the carpet by saying, oh, but the numbers are lesser than in America.
Yeah, Aisha, you're right. I mean, you have an acute eye on the establishment role in Pakistani politics amongst many. And you're absolutely right that it doesn't really matter what the number is. But then Baluchistan has become a cesspool of, so to say, separatist movement or mutiny or rebellious. And we know that there are a lot of foreign powers who would like to continue, whereas the Pakistani army is giving a huge sacrifice with their martyrs, with their jawans, with their officers and with the generals. So where will we draw the line when some people just go missing, so everybody is enforced disappearances?
You know, you sound exactly like Anwarul Haq Kakar. But let me tell you that, you know, cesspool, I mean, I'm very interested in your selection of words. The issue has been very simple. I mean, since 1947, even earlier, the Baloch people had insisted on their independence. We went for the state of Kalat, which is what Baluchistan was once. And a forcible, one claim is that the forcible, you know, accession was, you know, agreement was signed. But having said that, the fact is that since 1947, people in Balochistan have been protesting. I mean, they say that they do not want to be part of Pakistan. That's one extreme perspective, but there are other perspectives as well. I mean, for years and years, 76 years, people in rest of Pakistan have been enjoying natural gas. We sitting in Lahore and Islamabad don't even care. I mean, if we want to warm our hands, sometimes we turn on natural gas. The people of Swede, from where that natural gas was extracted, they were the last to get it. In fact, maybe not something like 20 years ago. So you cannot extract resources from a part of the land, use force, and then say it has become a cesspool. It's people protesting for what their right is, what belongs to them. And the other thing is that people die, I mean, military dies because of the kind of policies that generals make. Why do we think that it's just the people, the state? I mean, let's not forget East Pakistan, former East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. In March of 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman stood there in Dhaka and said, you know, long live Pakistan. Within months, you started a military operation, you got them out, you know, and then, of course, there was war from India, and the rest is history. Why do we insist on treating our own people with force?
But definitely there has to be some separation between the genuine. I'll just come to you, Raza, in a minute. But first of all, I thank you, Aisha, for telling me that I talk like Anwarul Haq Kakar, so I might be the next caretaker prime minister. Not this position that I'll be joking for. But there has to be a separation between the genuine grievances and certain ways of expressing them.
Who are we to decide? And are you the one to decide?
No, I'm just asking question. That's the whole idea, is this, to ask the question. And also, when there is a or many organization who blatantly want to be a secessionist movement. But let me ask Raza, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, so yes. I want to pick on your question and what Aisha said. I think the issue is that there is one section of the Baloch activists who want complete independence from Pakistan. You know, they say Azad Baluchistan. They have a whole movement and a global movement, very small, unfortunately not too effectual. But then there's a big number of people, Dr. Qureshi, who who are federalist politicians. So like Akbar Bugti. Akbar Bugti was a person a politician who was not against the idea of Pakistan, who did not want to separate from Pakistan. He was part of many governments, administrations. In fact, the other Baloch leaders used to criticize him for being too soft on Islamabad, but General Musharraf even killed him. Now, see the extreme disregard and devaluation of Baloch lives is the problem here. Then this guy Mengal, Akhtar Mengal, who is now currently part of the mainstream Pakistan's federal politics. He has been an ally of Nawaz Sharif. In the past, even he was part of the PDM government, and all he said was, bring some missing boys back. And his family members have died at the hands of or went missing. One of his brothers went missing. Now there are these politicians who say, okay, we are willing to talk to Islamabad. Let's find out. So not everybody's out in the arms. You see, that's the other thing we need to. So I'm just picking on Aisha's point, and then there's a third element which has now come up. Look at all these young women who have marched to Islamabad. These are not hardars, feudals. They are ordinary middle class people from Turbat, south of Baluchistan, new educated professionals. Some are government servants, some are doctors, some are teachers, and now they have come to Islamabad. They haven't picked up arms, they haven't brought bombs. They've sat, they're outside Islamabad Parliament saying, give us our rights. So they want to talk to them. But the reaction in Islamabad is so hyper. Whether it's Kakar or the military or this minister, they're like, oh, these separatists are here. Do you condemn violence? They're going and, making fun of them. Talk to them. Hear them out. And the thing is, and come clean. If you have killed the missing persons, give them closure. Find a way. The states have found ways to resolve these issues. They have apologized, they have compensated, they have changed their policies, they have found a new political arrangement, but you can't do this. And that's why we are polarized. There's that section that says we want to go away from Pakistan, we don't want Pakistan, and then there's the state narrative, oh, they all are violent people, they are all out to kill. So I think the political issue has to be resolved politically.
That's what I think, Raza, you raised a very, very important point. And Aisha, coming back to you, I think the way the state is treating these people who are protesting, it definitely shows that something is being hidden there by the public, and also that, as they say, something is rotten in the state of Denmark, so to say. So what do you think that the government can or should do?
See, it's very simple. I mean, what these women who came protesting to Islamabad was asking for is, they're saying, even if you've killed our loved ones, if these people are involved in any non-state activities, criminal activities, you have courts. Try them there. What kind of argument is that soldiers die? That's not, soldiers are not deputed to die. They're there to protect. And one doesn't want them to die. The problem is that the state makes and implements a policy which is so problematic from the start to the end that it then generates violence. And I would say that the soldiers are as much victims of that as the missing people, because they're suffering on both ends. Right?
You're right.
We can't sympathize with them. We're not supposed to sympathize with them. But the fact of the matter is that they're both victims and they're both suffering. And that suffering can only finish when the state becomes more mature, says, I'm going to sit down. Let me remind you of history. Under General Musharraf, set of politicians. There was Mushahid Hussain Sayyid from PMLN, there was Chaudhry Shujaat Hussain from PML.
Q, yeah, that's right.
And there were a couple of other politicians. They were sent to Baluchistan to negotiate. And they had decided on something. And then the military regime backed off from that agreement itself. So it's a political issue which the state is not mature enough to decide. That makes people angry, and that makes people say all kinds of things. I mean, look, around the world, people have asked for separation. There's nothing odd about it. I mean, look at Quebec in Canada, wanting to separate. Look at Scotland. Now, how many times do you have missing people? Scottish being picked up because they raised the slogan of separating from the United Kingdom. People have the right to demand for their political identity, right? We may not agree with it. I mean, I'm invested in Pakistan, right? But I would not say that the Baloch, if they can actually get their act together and prove to the state and negotiate a separate identity, fair enough. Perhaps
Aisha, you have made it look very simple, and I can understand that it's a very, very simple kind of equation. If the state is involved in this forced disappearances, then there has to be Truth and Reconciliation Act, so to say. But there has to be acceptance. It appears that the Pakistan law enforcement authority or authorities, they're not even accepting it. Is that how it is?
Well, what has happened is that the state is not accepting it. So when these women came to Islamabad, they were not asking for hotel rooms or guest houses. They were sleeping on the street, on the roads, with their own bedding. And what the state did was that it put, dirty water in them. It threw dirty water in them. It beat them. It used violence. So it means that the state is not willing to talk. I mean, what is easy and difficult about it?
Yeah.
At least hear them out.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Raza, you have a good handle on the human rights. So there is definitely the fundamental human rights being massacred here. And not only that, the state was supposed to be a mother for everyone, is really flouting all those rules. What is stopping the intelligentsia within the law enforcement authority, if there is one, to accept these voices, which are becoming a chorus now, and soon it will go to the international platforms? And why do you think it's not being heard internationally?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think efforts have been made at the UN Human Rights Council multiple times. They have called into question Pakistan government's policies. Pakistan has given the routine pro forma responses. Every 3-4 years this issue comes up. I think the issue is that in Pakistan's intelligentsia, that the word you use, is also divided. So divided in the sense that in recent days when these women were protesting, we saw a number of journalists going to these women and saying, you Baloch are killing Punjabi laborers. Do you condemn that? So it's just like the Hamas thing these days, every question starts, do you condemn Hamas before you go anything? Or after 9/11, they would say, do you condemn Al-Qaeda? Do you condemn 9/11? So Pakistan's intelligentsia and civil society, unfortunately, Pakistan's intelligentsia over time has withered and civil society has fractured. There have been efforts to destroy it by the state itself. The leading people, have been harassed, intimidated, threatened. So a lot of people don't speak up. A lot of people don't come out in the public. They are very mindful of this issue. Now, because of the bravery of these young women who marched for 1,500 kilometers, people were inspired, and you saw a resurgence of somewhat sympathy and talk about the Baloch issue, because it was fading away from the public attention. But I think there's a problem. But you know, all of this is, the most important players are the political parties, right? Intelligentsia and the political system is governed and managed by political parties, and the mainstream political parties are totally silent on this. When they're in opposition, they're opposing the establishment. Then, so at the moment, PTI is the most vocal about missing persons. The PMLN, the PPP are silent. They have not uttered a word. But when PMLN was at the receiving end of establishment, Mariam Nawaz went to the Baloch women and sympathized with them. So they use these peripheries also as a bargaining chip with the establishment. They're not interested in it. So what can the civil society do? You know, Aisha's Hadika can only do the Trace March or XYZ. The political parties have to take a stand that, you know, they are guardians of the parliament, and they are implementers of the constitution as parliamentarians and as future and present governments, and they have to tell the military and the intelligence agencies enough is enough. You know, you cannot do this. But
yeah, it is. It is. You're absolutely right that, you know, in the local Pakistani politics, despite people from Baluchistan seated in 3 of the top
positions,
positions or the position of powers, actually, the Prime Minister, the Chief Justice, and the Chairman of Senate, still these grievances, they're not heard. There's a Chinese proverb: grievances will at the end will triumph. They will succeed. So I think with that, I will ask the penultimate question from Aisha. Aisha, you have worked with a number of organizations, and you have been really one of the top intellectuals on this subject. Why do you think the Pakistani establishment is not listening to the people in general in Pakistan? So there is a good balance between the military civil governments, and especially on this very topic, on the missing persons. What is behind the scene which we don't know?
See, firstly, let me clarify one thing. The remark you made about, you know, people in Balochistan having a problem, despite that there are 3 important people from Balochistan at the moment: the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Prime Minister, caretaker Prime Minister. The caretaker Prime Minister is neither a Baloch, I would say, and not even a Pashtun that way. In the sense, he's very much somebody who's very comfortable working for the state. So he does not represent either the Pashtuns or the Baloch in government. Qazi Faiz Isa, he's a Qazi, he's not a Baloch. Again, he's a non-Baloch. And Sanjarani, who's the Speaker of the National Assembly, the problem, of the Senate, German Senate. See, the problem here is that for years, what the government has, or the Pakistani establishment has done for years, is select people who did not necessarily represent the people in Balochistan. You know, the fat birds, the fat cows from Balochistan, tribal leaders who were willing to support them, buy them out. They do not necessarily represent the Baloch people. So that's important, and it's important to understand. The other thing, going to your question, why doesn't the establishment realize the mistake it's making? Bad habits die hard, and when you are beneficiary of so much absolute power and you think that people don't matter, the fact of the matter is that in Pakistan, Balochistan, which is territorially the largest province, population-wise, it's the smallest province. And because the numbers are few and far between, because Baloch are ill-represented in the civil bureaucracy, in the military in particular, which is the most powerful institution of the country, therefore, nobody in the establishment takes them seriously. And the establishment looks at their resources. It is bad, I would repeat myself, it's bad habit. I mean, we had the largest province of the country, which is East Pakistan.
Yeah.
I mean, 51% of Pakistan's population was Bengalis. Yet, they were mistreated because they were not from mainstream Punjab or areas which the establishment represents. So the ethnic balance, which then results in the establishment being very dispassionate about rest of the country.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Now we have joined by a guest from Islamabad, Matiullah Jan. So can you please tell us whether this Baloch women's protest is still going on, and what is the situation there?
Well, it is still going on, and I think tomorrow is the day when they are going to hold another press conference, as we hear, and announce for their future strategy. But I think this protest was very troublesome for the government in the center, because all it could do was to arrange a parallel protest by pro-government or pro-establishment private organizations, particularly, namely Raza Foundation. And that was fully supported and backed and logistically sponsored by the government organizations. And therefore, two protests and two groups were now protesting. They tried to give an impression as if on the one side are the people who are protesting against missing persons, but at the same time, there are people who are victims of the missing person. This may sound very ridiculous for many, but this is what the government was trying to prove. And therefore, we had this parallel protest by another group of Baloch Sardars, Nawab Raisani and some others. Yeah. So I think it is not going anywhere from here. Both the groups are there, and they are staying and sitting outside the National Press Club in Islamabad, and they are trying to counter the narrative of each other. But I still believe that Baloch Yakjati Council, which had started all these protests, they still dominate media, and particularly the social media, and their issue is far more older, I must say, than the issue which is now being created by other group, namely Raza Foundation. Yeah. So it's unfortunate that there seems to be no end in sight.
Yeah, thank you, Mati, for letting us know that there are two groups still protesting, and obviously for the right reasons, and obviously it's if somebody's relative is taken away in these circumstances, it's not easy. There has been, before you came online, we were discussing the true numbers of these missing persons. There is a kind of it's quite foggy, basically. There are lots of claims. So what is the latest number that you could tell us about, which is being claimed and which has a kind of air of truth around it?
Well, there is a lot of controversy about numbers in Baluchistan, but the overall missing persons across the country, which are the data about which is being compiled by Defense of Human Rights, which is headed by Amna Masood Janjua, whose husband has also been missing for the last almost 18 years now. So it comes to be, I think, more than 3,000 now across Pakistan. And when it comes to Baloch, the missing persons families, they claim that it runs into more than 6,000 or 7,000. But at the same time, the official figures being given by the so-called Enforced Disappearances Commission, which is led by a former Supreme Court judge, they put the figure at around 50 or 60. And the latest data is being submitted with the Supreme Court also now. And let's see when the Supreme Court takes up this particular issue. But in Supreme Court, we don't have these Baloch petitioners as such, but we do have the Defense of Human Rights organization and some PTI lawyers who had actually filed the petition when many of their leaders were picked up and their whereabouts were not known. So that was the time when petition was filed. But since this petition has been taken up, many of those PTI leaders have returned, and now Supreme Court is only focusing on the real missing persons and the issue of missing persons as a whole. Let's see how government responds to it. But one particular question which was raised in the Supreme Court in the last hearing was the production orders that were issued by the Enforced Justice Commission. Production order means that the commission thinks that the person is kidnapped by the state agency, and therefore the production orders are issued to the intelligence agency and the government. And those over 700 production orders have not yet been complied with. And the Attorney General now has been asked by the Supreme Court to clarify government's position with regard to those production orders in the next hearing, which is likely to take place in a couple of weeks from now.
Oh, thank you, Mati. I mean, there's a huge discrepancy between the official figure of 50 to 60 and the claimed 5 to 6,000 people missing. Yeah, and obviously you have 50 to 60 persons. Yeah, that's right. So there's a huge discrepancy. And earlier we were actually discussing and acknowledging it doesn't really matter whether there's even one person, but the enforced disappearances, which has an element of the state's involvement in making people disappear, that is an ethical, moral, legal, and social dilemma. I just ask you the one last question. Do you think there is any serious effort by the government or the law enforcement agencies or by the Supreme Court in resolving this matter, or do you see any closure to it in near future?
I think the state itself is not serious in terms of recovering missing people and trying to find out where have they gone. They're not serious because they themselves are the suspect. And therefore, many of the missing persons who have returned home, some of them have not even been speaking to anybody in the police or in with the government authorities, and even the government authorities are not interested in interviewing them and trying to find out where they were, because they know where they were and where they were kept. So the seriousness of this state is only the extent of trying to reach out to the families of the missing persons who are likely to have either been killed or they have died for some reasons, and therefore the state would want the family members to come to some kind of a compromise, which might include the informative whereabouts, whether they are dead or alive, and then ultimately the state organizations or the officials, they expect that the families would forget about them and forget them as well for whatever has happened in the past. So to this extent, state is trying to seriously find out a solution, some kind of a compromise with the families of the missing persons, but not serious in actually trying to find out where the missing persons are to punish those who are involved in this business of enforced disappearances.
Thank you, Mati. Aisha, you heard what Mati said. It appears the general opinion is this, that the state is not really very serious in resolving this matter. And I earlier asked Raza, and part of that question was probably unanswered. What is the role of international community on this issue, which is going on for a very long time? And I know that we have really overtaken our deadline of 7:20 p.m. here in London, but this will be the last question. And I would like you to kindly answer, and then maybe Raza, you can add anything in that.
See, the Baloch issue itself, Baluchistan issue, it's been going on for very long. and it has been followed internationally. So every now and then, I mean, just like people around the world write about Kashmir, right? People who don't even belong there, and the international community does take notice of human rights atrocities in Kashmir. So people used to, but not to that degree. Now, since the missing persons issue has really enhanced and has become more serious, problem is that the world itself is now so involved in so many issues. I mean, from Ukraine to Middle East to there's so many others, that unfortunately Baloch people are kind of left on their own in some ways. And that is the sad part, and that is what puts greater responsibility on the shoulders of Pakistanis to stand up for their fellow citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
The other thing is, I mean, and by the way, it's not that it's completely unnoticed. I mean, when the state became, kind of adopted its high-handed tactics in Islamabad against these women, then finally there was a statement given by the head of the ambassador of the European Union. And that's when the Pakistani state then kind of pulled back a bit because they're concerned about the G plus status.
Yes.
and trade with European Union. Yes. But beyond that, I don't think there is anyone internationally putting a lot of pressure on Pakistan, which they should, like anywhere else in the world. When people are victimized, people around the world should stand up.
Yeah. Thank you. Raza, is it because that there's only about 10 or so million population in Baluchistan, and Pakistan is one of the probably more coveted ally of the international powers in this area, that these blatant or flagrant human rights violations are being ignored?
Yeah, I think partly both the factors at work. I mean, it's a smaller population. There's no question about that. And obviously, and because they're small in number, the diaspora, the Baloch diaspora is also very small. And remember that, most of Baloch diaspora is concentrated in Oman and UAE and other parts, and very few in the West. And obviously, when we talk about the international community or those who care about the human rights, we talk about Western countries. The Chinese don't, the Gulf states don't. So obviously, it's a small number. But more importantly, the international allies of Pakistan historically, like the United States, the UK, and to some degree EU, have had their interests with, when they don't want to lose favor or currency with Pakistan army. They can arm twist, pressurize, but ultimately Pakistan military is their ally, and they want them for their own global security projects. So that's why the pressure is not forthcoming.
Well, I think it's a pitiable and shameful situation for the human rights, and especially for these Balochi women who are being treated very, very unfairly and harshly. Dear audience, you watched this very lively and detailed discussion and debate on this phenomenon of missing persons. We have given our platform for the freedom of opinion and expression to all those people who want to say something within the realm of decency and law to express their opinion, especially on these vital issues. The entire project of missing persons is based on only one thing: to critically and analytically debate and discuss this matter, so the aggrieved parties, especially the missing persons and their families, they feel they are heard and there are solutions that can come up. And at the same time, we want to restore the pride of Pakistan and its brave law enforcement agencies, especially Pakistan Army, back to its former glory with no tarnish or taint on their reputation. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again next week.